everyone, Elizabeth here. The Last Laugh delivers stories that leave you speechless. If you're here for it, hit subscribe and let's go.
My family decided I was troubled when I was 14. That was the year I stopped arguing back. The year I learned that silence was safer than defending myself. The year I discovered that gray clothes and quiet movements made me invisible at family dinners. Emma's going through a phase, Mom told relatives, her voice dripping with concern that felt like performance art. She's always been sensitive, Dad added, shaking his head as if I were a puppy that wouldn't stop peeing on the carpet. My older brother Daniel was 20 at the time, golden and confident, studying business at State. He'd started the narrative, Emma's weird. She doesn't talk to anyone. Something's wrong with her. Nothing was wrong with me. I was just tired of being criticized for every word I spoke. So I stopped speaking. I went to school, got straight A's, came home, did my homework in my room and avoided family gatherings whenever possible. I read books about computer programming and dreamed about the day I could leave. "We're worried about you," Mom said during one of her periodic concerned parent performances, sitting on my bed uninvited. "You barely participate in family activities." Because family activities meant listening to Daniel brag about his fraternity while everyone applauded, or watching my parents fawn over his mediocre accomplishments while my achievements went unmentioned. "I'm fine," I said. "That's exactly what someone who's not fine would say," she replied as if she'd unlocked some profound psychological truth. They made me see a therapist. Dr. Patricia Wong, a kind woman in her 50s who spent 3 sessions confirming I was a perfectly normal teenager dealing with a difficult family dynamic. "Your daughter is mentally healthy," Dr. Wong told my parents. "She's introverted and processing some family tension, but there's no cause for concern." My parents ignored her completely. The troubled Emma narrative became family gospel. Every quiet moment was evidence of my instability. Every time I chose reading over socializing, it proved something was wrong with me. Every boundary I set was a symptom. "She needs help," Dad said at Thanksgiving when I was 17 as if I weren't sitting right there. "Professional help," Mom agreed. Daniel smirked. "She's always been off." I stopped attending family dinners entirely after that. I graduated high school with a 4.0, got a full scholarship to study computer science, and moved 3 hours away for college. For the first time in years I could breathe. My parents called it running away from her problems. I called it survival. College was where I learned I wasn't broken. My family was. I met people who valued quiet intelligence. Professors who appreciated depth over performance. Friends who understood that introversion wasn't pathology. I excelled in my program. I worked 3 part-time jobs to supplement my scholarship. I started freelancing, building websites, fixing security vulnerabilities, consulting on network infrastructure. By my junior year I'd saved $50,000. By graduation I had $120,000 and a job offer from a defense contractor paying $85,000 annually. Exceptional for a new graduate. I didn't tell my family about the job specifics. I told them I was doing computer work for the government. "Secretary work?" Mom asked. "Technical," I corrected. "Oh, like IT support," Daniel said dismissively. He was working at our father's commercial real estate firm, making $60,000 and living in a condo my parents had helped him buy. "Something like that," I said. The job required a top-secret security clearance, which meant extensive background checks, interviews and psychological evaluations. I passed everything easily. Dr. Sarah Chin conducted my first psychiatric evaluation. She was in her early 40s, Harvard-educated, and one of the leading experts in psychological assessments for government security clearances. "You're one of the most mentally stable candidates I've evaluated," she told me after our 3-hour session. "Strong emotional regulation, excellent judgment, no concerning patterns." "My family thinks I'm troubled," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Based on?" "I'm quiet. I don't engage in family drama. I set boundaries." Dr. Chin made a note. "Those are signs of health, not illness. I'll need to evaluate you quarterly for the next year as part of your clearance maintenance, but I don't anticipate any issues." He was right. Every 3 months I met with Dr. Chin. Every time she confirmed what I already knew. I was fine. My career accelerated. Within 2 years I was managing classified projects worth $12 million. Within 4 years, I was leading a team of 15 engineers on contracts totaling $67 million annually. My salary reached $180,000. Then $240,000. Then, with bonuses and profit sharing from projects I led, over $400,000 annually. I bought a house, a small 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood. I invested carefully. I lived comfortably but not ostentatiously. I saw my family twice a year. Christmas and Thanksgiving, obligations I endured rather than enjoyed. Still doing computer stuff? Daniel would ask, his tone suggesting I was wasting my potential. Yes. Emma's never been ambitious, Dad would say. Some people are just comfortable with mediocrity. I'd nod and say nothing, the way I'd learned to do at 14. What they didn't know was that I held a top-secret/SCI security clearance. What they didn't know was that I consulted on cyber defense systems protecting critical national infrastructure. What they didn't know was that my work literally kept the country safe. I didn't tell them because they wouldn't believe me. Or worse, they'd find a way to minimize it. So I stayed quiet, visited twice a year, and built my life in peace. Then my uncle died and everything changed. Uncle James was my father's older brother, wealthy and childless. He'd made his fortune in tech investments in the 1990s and retired at 55. I'd always liked him. He was one of the few family members who didn't treat me like I was defective. We'd bonded over our shared interest in technology, though I'd never told him the full scope of my work. When he died suddenly at 68 from a heart attack, the family gathered for the funeral. Daniel was already calculating inheritance shares before Uncle James was in the ground. He was worth at least $10 million, I overheard him telling our father. Split 4 ways, that's $2.5 million each. James was always generous, Dad agreed. He'll take care of family. The will reading was scheduled for 1 week after the funeral. We gathered in the law office of Morrison and Associates. Uncle James's attorney, Richard Morrison, was a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and an unreadable expression. James's estate totals $8.4 million, he began. He's made very specific arrangements. Daniel leaned forward. Dad pulled out his phone to take notes. Mom adjusted her pearls. To his brother David, $100,000. Dad nodded, looking slightly disappointed. To his nephew Daniel, $100,000. Daniel's face tightened, but he said nothing. To his sister-in-law Patricia, $50,000. Mom smiled tightly. The remainder of the estate, $8.15 million, goes to his niece, Emma Anderson, to be held in trust. Silence. Then Daniel exploded. What? Dad stood up. That's impossible. Mom's face went pale. There must be a mistake. I sat perfectly still, hands folded in my lap, trying to process what I'd just heard. Richard Morrison remained calm. There's no mistake. James updated his will 8 months ago. He was very clear about his intentions. This is insane, Daniel said, his voice rising. Emma barely even talked to him. She's mentally unstable. She can't manage that kind of money. James was aware of Emma's psychological history, Richard said carefully. He still made this choice. What psychological history? I asked quietly. Daniel turned to me. Everyone knows you've had problems since you were a teenager. You're not equipped to handle this. James left a letter, Richard interrupted. Would you like me to read it? Yes, I said. Richard pulled out an envelope and began reading. To my family, I know this distribution will surprise you. Let me explain. Emma is the only person in this family who built something real without fanfare or demands for recognition. She works on projects she can't discuss for reasons of national security, and she's never once bragged about it. I know because I have friends in the defense sector. I asked about her. What I learned made me prouder than I've been of any family member. Emma doesn't need this money, but she deserves it. She's earned it through competence, integrity, and the quiet strength of someone who succeeds despite, not because of, family support. To Daniel, David, and Patricia, you have comfortable lives and each other's approval. That's worth something. Emma has had to earn everything alone. This is my way of showing her that someone noticed, someone appreciated it, and someone believed in her all along. Emma, build something extraordinary. I know you will. The silence in that office was deafening. Then Daniel stood up. We're contesting this. 3 weeks later I received the lawsuit. Daniel was the primary plaintiff, with my parents as supporting plaintiffs. The petition claimed I lacked mental capacity to manage the trust due to documented psychological instability dating back to adolescence. They wanted the entire trust redistributed to Daniel, whom they described as financially responsible and mentally sound. I called Richard Morrison. "I expected this," he said calmly. "James did too. That's why he structured it as a trust with specific protective provisions." Can they win? Not if we demonstrate you're mentally competent, which shouldn't be difficult. You hold a top-secret security clearance. The government doesn't grant those to unstable individuals. They'll bring up my teenage years. The therapy. Did the therapist diagnose you with anything? No. She said I was healthy. Then we have nothing to worry about. I'll refer you to an excellent attorney who specializes in trust litigation. That's how I met Margaret Lynn, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who'd spent 20 years protecting trusts from frivolous challenges. "Your brother's case is weak," she said during our first meeting reviewing the lawsuit. "He's claiming you're mentally unstable based on being quiet as a teenager? That's not going to fly. My family will testify that I was troubled, that I needed help, that I've always been unstable." Margaret smiled. "And then we'll bring in actual mental health professionals who've evaluated you. Let me guess, you've had recent psychiatric evaluations. Quarterly for 5 years. For my security clearance." Her smile widened. "Perfect. They're going to regret this lawsuit very quickly." The discovery phase began. Daniel's attorney, an aggressive litigator named Thomas Brennan, requested extensive documentation. All medical records, employment history, details about my government computer work, and my current psychiatric status. Margaret responded with a strategic move. She provided my employment title, Senior Cybersecurity Analyst, Department of Defense Contractor, but cited national security privileges for project details. She also provided a letter from my employer confirming my top-secret/SCI clearance and excellent performance reviews. Thomas Brennan called 2 days later, according to Margaret. "Your client has a top-secret clearance?" he'd said, surprised. "Yes. Maintained continuously for 5 years with quarterly psychiatric evaluations." The plaintiffs weren't aware of this. Clearly. This doesn't change the core issue. Mental illness can be hidden. Not from government psychiatrists conducting security clearance evaluations, Margaret countered. "But if you'd like to proceed and have your clients explain to a judge why they think they know better than Harvard-trained psychiatrists and federal security investigators, be my guest." The court date was set for 6 weeks out. The courtroom was cold, both literally and atmospherically. Judge William Bradford presided, a stern man in his late 60s known for his intolerance of frivolous lawsuits. Daniel sat with my parents and Thomas Brennan. I sat with Margaret. The gallery was mostly empty except for a few observers and a court reporter. Thomas Brennan opened with his case. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward matter of mental capacity. Emma Anderson has a documented history of psychological instability dating back to adolescence. She was withdrawn, uncommunicative, and required therapeutic intervention. Her own family has consistently expressed concern about her mental health." He gestured toward my family. "The plaintiffs seek to protect a substantial trust from mismanagement by someone who lacks the capacity to handle it responsibly." My father took the stand first. "Mr. Anderson, can you describe your daughter's behavior during her teenage years?" Dad settled into his testimony like he'd rehearsed it. "Emma was troubled. She isolated herself, refused to participate in family activities, barely spoke to anyone. We were very worried. Did you seek help for her?" "Yes. We took her to a therapist when she was 16. "And what was the outcome?" "The therapist said she was fine, but we knew better. A parent knows their child." Thomas nodded sympathetically. "Has her behavior improved over the years?" "No. She's still withdrawn, barely communicates with family, keeps to herself. She claims to work for the government, but we've never seen evidence of that. She's evasive about her life." "In your opinion, is she capable of managing $8.15 million? "Absolutely not. She can barely manage normal family relationships." My mother testified next, her performance dripping with false concern. "Emma's always been fragile," she said, dabbing at completely dry eyes. "As a mother, you just know when something's wrong. She's never been able to handle stress or responsibility. Daniel's testimony was the most aggressive. My sister has serious psychological problems, he stated confidently. She's been unstable since we were kids. She isolated herself, refused help, and now she's claiming to have some important government job that none of us have ever seen proof of. Do you believe she's capable of managing the trust? No. She'll waste it or make poor decisions. Someone responsible needs to oversee this money. Someone like you? Yes. I work in finance. I understand money management. I'm the logical choice. Thomas Brennan rested his case, looking satisfied. Then Margaret stood. Your Honor, I'd like to call Dr. Patricia Wong. My teenage therapist entered, now in her late 60s, still carrying the same kind demeanor. After swearing in, Margaret began. Dr. Wong, you evaluated Emma Anderson when she was 16. Can you tell the court about that evaluation? Emma was a perfectly healthy teenager dealing with a difficult family dynamic. She was introverted, intelligent, and setting appropriate boundaries. I found no evidence of mental illness or instability. Did you recommend ongoing treatment? No. I told her parents she was fine and didn't need therapy. They seemed disappointed with that assessment. Disappointed. They wanted me to diagnose her with something. I couldn't because there was nothing to diagnose. Thomas Brennan declined to cross-examine. Margaret smiled. I'd like to call our next witness, Dr. Sarah Chin. A woman in her mid-40s entered, wearing a professional suit and carrying an impressive folder of documents. She had the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly how credible she was. After swearing in, Margaret began. Dr. Chin, please state your credentials. I'm a licensed psychiatrist, Harvard Medical School graduate, with a specialty in psychological evaluations for government security clearances. I've conducted over 3,000 such evaluations in my career. How do you know Emma Anderson? I've evaluated her quarterly for the past 5 years as part of her top-secret security clearance maintenance. The courtroom went silent. Daniel's face flushed. My parents exchanged shocked glances. Margaret continued. Can you explain what a top-secret security clearance requires? It's one of the highest security clearances granted by the U.S. government. Candidates undergo extensive background checks, interviews, and psychological evaluations. We assess mental stability, judgment, reliability, and trustworthiness. The standards are extremely rigorous. And Emma passed these evaluations? Not just passed, she's one of the most mentally stable individuals I've evaluated. Excellent emotional regulation, superior judgment, strong moral character, and exceptional stress management. You've evaluated her 20 times over 5 years? Yes. Every 3 months as required for her clearance level. And your assessment has been consistent? Completely. Emma Anderson exhibits no signs of mental illness, instability, or impaired judgment. In fact, her psychological profile is what we call exceptional. She scores in the top 5% of all clearance holders for mental and emotional stability. Margaret pulled out documents. Your Honor, I'm submitting Dr. Chen's evaluation reports, along with letters from the Department of Defense confirming Ms. Anderson's clearance status and exemplary performance. Judge Bradford examined the documents, his expression shifting from neutral to openly skeptical of the plaintiffs. Margaret turned back to Dr. Chen. Doctor, the plaintiffs have claimed Ms. Anderson was troubled as a teenager, withdrawn, and required therapy. Does this concern you? Not remotely. Introversion isn't pathology. Setting boundaries with difficult family members is healthy, not troubled. What I'd find concerning would be someone who couldn't establish boundaries or who sought constant external validation. In your professional opinion, is Emma Anderson capable of managing an $8.15 million trust? Absolutely. She manages classified projects worth tens of millions of dollars for the federal government. She exercises sound judgment under extreme pressure. She's more qualified than most people to handle significant financial responsibility. Thank you, Dr. Chin. Thomas Brennan stood for cross-examination, looking considerably less confident than before. Dr. Chin, isn't it possible for someone to hide mental illness, even from a trained professional? In a single evaluation, perhaps. Over 20 evaluations spanning 5 years with extensive background checks and colleague interviews? Well, we would have seen patterns. But, Mr. Brennan, the federal government trusts Emma Anderson with information that could affect national security. They've investigated her more thoroughly than you've investigated anyone in your life. If she were unstable, her clearance would have been revoked immediately. Thomas sat down. Margaret called one final witness. Richard Morrison, Uncle James's attorney. Mr. Morrison, was James Anderson aware of his niece's security clearance and career? Yes. He had friends in the defense sector and inquired about her. He was immensely proud of her accomplishments. Did he have concerns about her mental capacity? None whatsoever. He specifically stated in meetings with me that Emma was the most capable member of his family, and he trusted her completely. Thank you. Judge Bradford called a brief recess. When we reconvened, Judge Bradford looked directly at my brother. I've reviewed the evidence presented. This is one of the most baseless lawsuits I've seen in 20 years on the bench. Daniel's face went red. The plaintiffs claim the defendant lacks mental capacity based on being quiet as a teenager. Meanwhile, the defendant holds one of the highest security clearances granted by the U.S. government, manages classified projects worth millions, and has been consistently evaluated as exceptionally mentally stable by Harvard-trained psychiatrists. Judge Bradford's voice hardened. The plaintiffs either didn't bother to learn basic facts about their own family member, or they knew and filed this lawsuit anyway. Either scenario is unacceptable. My father shifted uncomfortably. My mother stared at her hands. James Anderson made an informed choice to leave his estate to the family member he deemed most capable. Nothing presented here suggests he was wrong. The trust stands as written. He paused. Furthermore, I'm sanctioning the plaintiff's $75,000 for bringing a frivolous lawsuit, plus Ms. Anderson's legal fees of $43,000. Total, $118,000 split among the three plaintiffs. The gavel came down. Case dismissed. Daniel stood up, his face purple with rage. This is bullshit. She's been lying to us for years. Mr. Anderson, one more outburst and I'll hold you in contempt, Judge Bradford warned. She works for the government. He has a top-secret clearance. Bullshit. Bailiff, remove Mr. Anderson. As security approached, Daniel turned to me, his voice breaking. You let us think you were nobody. You let us think you were just some low-level secretary. I looked at him calmly. I never said I was a secretary. You assumed that. I corrected you once and you dismissed me. So I stopped trying. We had a right to know. No, I said quietly. You had the right to ask respectfully. To believe me when I answered. To show basic interest in my life. You chose mockery instead. That's on you, not me. My mother finally spoke, her voice shaking. How could you keep this from us? Because you spent my entire childhood telling me I was troubled, broken, and unstable. Why would I share my success with people who wanted me to fail? Dad stood, his face hard. We're your family. You're people who share my DNA, I corrected. Family requires respect, support, and belief. You've never offered me those things. The bailiff escorted Daniel out, still shouting. My parents followed without another word. Outside the courtroom, Margaret squeezed my shoulder. You did great. Thank you for everything. The sanctions and fees will be paid within 30 days. If they appeal, which I doubt, we'll pursue additional sanctions. Dr. Chin approached us. Emma, I wanted you to know, I didn't have to exaggerate anything in there. Every word was true. You're one of the most mentally sound people I've ever evaluated. That means a lot. Your family's wrong about you. They always have been. I hope today proved that. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with texts from Daniel. You're a liar. You manipulated Uncle James. We'll find a way to prove you're unstable. I blocked his number, then blocked my parents' numbers. I drove home to my quiet house, made tea, and sat on my back porch watching the sunset. For the first time in my life, I felt completely free. The sanctions were paid 28 days later. My family did not appeal. I used Uncle James's trust exactly as he'd hoped. I invested in emerging cybersecurity companies, funded scholarships for women in STEM fields, and established a foundation supporting mental health services for young people dealing with toxic family dynamics. The foundation was called the James Anderson Foundation for Quiet Strength. 6 months after the trial, I received a letter from Daniel. I almost threw it away, but curiosity won. Emma, I've spent 6 months angry. Angry at you, at Uncle James, at the court. But mostly I've been angry at myself. I've had to face the fact that I don't know you at all. That I never tried to know you. That I spent our entire lives assuming you were less than me when the truth was the opposite. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what I lost when I chose mockery over curiosity. You were right there the whole time doing incredible things and I was too arrogant to see it. I hope you build something amazing with Uncle James's gift. I hope you forget we exist. Daniel. I read it twice, then filed it away. Not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. That was something. My parents never reached out. I heard through extended family that they'd told everyone I'd stolen the inheritance through manipulation, that the judge had been fooled, that I was still troubled and would eventually prove them right. Let them think that. Their opinions stopped mattering the day Judge Bradford's gavel came down. 2 years after the trial, I was promoted to Director of Cybersecurity Operations, overseeing projects worth $340 million annually across multiple government agencies. I still saw Dr. Chen quarterly for my clearance evaluations. "How are things?" she asked during one session. "Good. Quiet. Productive. Any contact with your family?" "None. It's peaceful." She smiled. "You know, in all my years doing these evaluations, I've never seen someone so thoroughly misunderstood by their own family. The cognitive dissonance between who they thought you were and who you actually are is remarkable. They needed me to be small so they could feel big. And now I don't need their opinion of me to know my worth. I have security clearance evaluations for that." We both laughed. I left that session and drove to Uncle James's grave, something I did quarterly, the same schedule as my psych evaluations. "The foundation funded its 100th scholarship last month," I told him. "Young woman from an abusive home, full ride to MIT for computer science. She reminds me of me." The afternoon sun warmed the headstone. "Thank you for seeing me, Uncle James. For knowing me when my own parents couldn't. For trusting me with this." I stood to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Daniel's business is struggling. Dad's real estate firm lost 3 major clients. Mom's friends keep asking her about her daughter who works for the government, and she has to admit she doesn't actually know what I do." I smiled. Turns out the troubled daughter is doing just fine. As I drove away, I thought about 14-year-old me, quiet, dismissed, convinced something was wrong with her. I wished I could tell her, "You're not broken. You're strategic. You're protecting yourself from people who want to diminish you. And one day you'll build something so undeniable that their opinions will become irrelevant. Keep building in silence. The people who matter will see you. The ones who don't, they'll spend the rest of their lives explaining to others why they didn't."